Hey guys, V. Ragone Max, high performance real estate entrepreneur. Now we just did a video regarding residential, this economy, how these 8% interest rates are affecting residential. And is this the 1980s or is this 2008 all over again? So let's be talking about it now, and let's be talking about it regarding apartment, multifamily, and what does it look like there? Because it looks completely different than it does on the residential. Now, before we do that, let's subscribe to the channel. Let's hit the like button. Let's leave some comments. I don't care if they're nasty. Nasty's okay. I got a thick skin. I've been around for a while. And remember what I always say, think big, start now, grow fast. So we've been talking about the fact that residential interest rates, they hit 8% last week. 8%. Now, what does that look like? Well, compared to commercial, where now that's going to be in the 9s to 10s, because residential is always cheaper than commercial. And when you go to buy an apartment building, what are you paying? You're paying commercial rates. You're getting a commercial loan. Now, anything above 4 units, because under 5 units, you could be working under a residential type mortgage through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. You're going to be working under residential qualifications. But once you go above 4, you start to get the 5 all the way to 500. Doesn't matter. You're dealing with a commercial loan. That's different than the residential loan. All right. Now, they have different types of clauses in there. Interest rates can, if you get a fixed rate mortgage on a residential, yes, it can go up, but that can be not more than once in a given year. It might be once every 2 years. On commercial, it can be more often. On residential, yes, they ask you to have some basic reserves, a little bit of reserve, but they have no opinion of the amount of reserve afterwards, and you don't even have to hold it afterwards. They just require it at the time of purchase. You hardly even notice it. It's so small. The term of the loan can be as much as 30 years. Now, when it comes to commercial loans, they tell you how much you have to have in reserve. They tell you that they want to have proof of that on a yearly basis. Plus, they have the ability to in most of these loans, they actually have the ability to cause you to have to increase your reserves if they think the economy warrants it. And they could be substantial increases, tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And on large buildings, they could be hundreds of thousands to millions. You get a notice that says, hey, you've got 4 months, 6 months, according to the term of your commercial loan. According to the terms, you have to increase these reserves. Or the interest rates can go up more often than every 2 years. They can put in there whatever they want. It's a commercial loan, all right? There is no let's protect, the consumer when it comes to commercial. You're supposed to know. Buyer beware, baby. That used to be in all the contracts. Now, what's another one? Loan to value. When you buy your house, there's a thing called the loan to value, right? You put down, a 10%, and they're going to lend you 90, or you put down 3.5, they're going to lend you the rest. That's your loan to value. Now, they determine the value of the property. They'll subtract out what your down payment is. That's your loan to value. Same thing happens in commercial, except commercial loans require that you maintain a certain loan to value. So you can be subject to the fluctuations of the mark-to-market concept. It's a concept, it's a reality in multifamily and in commercial, that if the property value drops below a certain dollar amount, a certain percentage, you're going to have to increase the amount of equity that because if your property value drops, right, your equity, your percentage of equity to loan changes. And so then you may have to bring in more equity, and you may have to raise more money. If you are doing this through a real estate syndication, you might have to do a capital call. There are a lot of syndicators out there right now. They're doing capital calls. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And that means they're going back to their limited partners and they're saying, hey, you need to put more money in. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Why do I have to put more money in? Well, because they're going to take the property from us, the mortgage company, if we don't. Now, is it dire right now? No. But the banks have been given the word by the Federal Reserve, by the federal banking system. They've been given the word to go easy on these people on their loan to value requirements. So that's a good thing. But depending on how bad this gets, will determine whether or not there's some serious foreclosure activity. Now, why should things be in trouble? All right. Now, when I talked about residential, and I talked about how, this is more like the 1980s than it is like 2008, because everybody out there is comparing this to 2008 on the residential side. And I got to tell you, folks, they are so far away from that. The mark on that is ridiculous. And you know why they say that? Because they didn't go back to the 1980s. They started their careers in the 90s and 2000s. They don't remember what the 1980s were. They weren't old enough. That's where wisdom comes in, remember? Memory. There's no wisdom without memory. Well, they don't have a memory of this. Some of these people weren't even alive. Anyhow, I digress. But when it comes to commercial, now we're talking about, this is a little bit more like 2008. And why is that? Well, because there's a whole bunch of people out there under two circumstances that are going to be in trouble. Let's just talk about the first circumstance. The first circumstance is more broad-based, that there are hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of commercial loans coming due over the next 12 to 24 months that are going to have to get refinanced at these higher rates. They've had these loans for 10 years. And where were commercial loan rates in 10 years ago? Well, they were low, 3-4%. Now, you might say, but they fixed up the properties. But yes, when they fixed up the properties, what did they do? Part of the forced appreciation model around multifamily is to buy it, fix it up, raise the rents, go back, refinance it, pull the equity, a big chunk of that equity out as much as they'll let you. That resets a higher mortgage payment because the interest rates were low, and then use that to buy some more real estate. And that's great, except the unintended consequence of raising interest rates to where they've risen them in the last 18 to 2 years. Coming up on 2 years now. And what do I mean by that? Well, because now they're sitting there and they fixed up this property. Yes, they made a lot of money, but they pulled that money out and spent it somewhere else. And then now you have this new mortgage that's been on the property for 10 years. It's not that new, but it's coming up for refi. And it was at 4. Now it's going to be at 9 or 10 or higher, depending on how high rates go. Do you think that could create a problem? If all of a sudden the mortgage payment doubles on these guys? Absolutely. So you have hundreds of billions of dollars of great buildings that are fully rented. And what I mean by fully rented is according to basically the 95% or more occupancy, right? That are going to be in big trouble just because of the financing. But financing is a big part of any real estate, of any investment. It's how you finance it. Now, who are the other people that are in trouble? Well, these are the people that 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, now 3 years ago, because time goes by, they were buying at top dollar. These are the guys who got into business in the real estate syndication, late. These are the ones that just, they pedal to the metal, never look back. They're going to either get rich or go bankrupt. Except they're going to take people with them when they go bankrupt. They're going to take some of their limited partners with them when they go bankrupt. All right? Because what did they do? They went out, bought buildings. I don't care if it was a 6-unit building or it was a 60-unit building or a 600-unit building. It doesn't matter. They went out and they bought these buildings. And they paid top dollar. They were competing against 10, 20 other investment groups. And they're bidding this thing up and up and up. And why could they do that? Well, because they said, okay, we've got a 4%, 3% fixed interest rate. That'll work. But a lot of these properties got to a point where they couldn't make it work at 3 and 4%. It would have been a negative cash flow at 4%, 5%. So what did they do? They went to a 2.5% adjustable rate mortgage. Now, if you couldn't make the thing work at 4, and so then you got the deal, and did the seller care? The seller didn't care. He got all his cash and left at the closing. So you couldn't make this deal work at 4 or 5, so you went with a 2.5% adjustable mortgage. And now you are getting pummeled because now those rates have skyrocketed, and depending upon how often they can raise that interest rate on you as the person who's paying the mortgage, you're pretty much screwed. You get 2-3 increases in that interest rate. Now all of a sudden you're sitting there with with a 5, 6, 7% adjustable that's adjusted up. Now, what does that do to the payment? It could double, triple the payment. Doesn't that remind you a whole lot of what took place in the real estate market in 2008, right? Because the 8 was when that thing collapsed, right? The 2007, 2008 is when the real estate collapsed. It was basically more in 2007. The stock market collapsed in 2008. There's about a year lag between the two. But it took years to get to that 2007, right? It took all the bad decisions of people buying homes with the ninja loans, first adjustable rate mortgage. Oh yeah, because you know why you're going to buy with adjustable? Because they're never going to raise the interest rates. They're always going to keep them down. Why? Because they've been down for the last 5 years. They've been down since 9/11. Who's going to raise them? Well, wasn't that kind of stupid? In that situation, they had bought these homes based upon almost 0% mortgage rates. They were buying them on LIBOR, on monthly LIBOR rate adjustments. They start out with a 1% interest rate, and then the damn thing could go up, and the rate could just double in months. That's what was going on in 2008. The ninja loans, right? The WAMU loans, pay whatever you want loans. The loans in which you didn't need a job to apply. You could lie about your credit. You could lie about your income. They were called liar loans. They were called stated loans, where you just get the stated, no one was going to check. Well, I don't think it was that bad in this. All the fraud that took place in 2006, 2005, they give you 2007. I don't think that the fraud was there when it comes to these multifamily buildings, but the bad financing was there. The bad decision about, we want this property, so we're going to pay up for it, and we're just going to adjust the fact that we paid up for it by getting an adjustable rate mortgage, because they haven't raised their interest rates in 20 years. So effectively, it was a period of 2015 a little bit, but they effectively have not raised interest rates in 20 years. So therefore, why should they do it now? Well, that's kind of short-term stupid thinking, right? Right? I mean, isn't that stupid is what stupid does? So these buildings that there's a lot of multifamily buildings, whether they be 12 units, 6 units, 24 units, whatever it is, 60 units. These are the buildings that are also going to be coming up for sale at discounts. Why? Because when these buildings get in trouble and they have to raise money, whether it be to make the mortgage payment or at the same time they've been getting hit because their reserves have been, as I talked about earlier, commercial banks, they require these people to have reserves, and a building might have been required to have $8,000 in reserves. Now all of a sudden they're required to have $40,000, $60,000, $80,000 in reserves, because the banks understand the risk that the borrower is going to be facing as the interest rates rise on their adjustable rate mortgage, especially in the short term here where rents are getting a little softer. And so now they're going back to their investors and they're saying, hey, we're going to have to raise some additional money. Everybody's got to send in $10,000 more, $50,000 more. And these people, these limited partners, they have no idea that's coming in many cases. And they haven't had any conversations coming up to that point, because a lot of these people are scared to talk to their limited partners. Why? Because they promised them pie in the sky. Well, the pie is turning bad. So then what is the alternative? Well, then they go looking for vulture investors. That's right, vulture. You can imagine, right? It's not going to be good. All right? Or they just give the buildings back to the bank at some point. And you're seeing this, not just in this thing is playing out this way in some of the multifamily. In the overall industry of the multifamily is secure. Anything with fixed rate interest is secure. It's the ones that were bought with the adjustables and they did not buy caps. And a cap is where it can only go up so high, it can only increase so much. But a lot of those caps, they only last for a year or 2 or 3. They're periods of time. And in fact, now if you want to go buy a cap on an adjustable, depending upon the size of the loan, it could be hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to buy interest rate caps. Whereas before, they were pennies. Because everybody just said, hey, rates are never going to go up, so if you want to buy a cap, go ahead. And they bought them for next to nothing. Well, people who didn't think ahead, the ones that had the adjustables and thought ahead and bought a cap there was just a huge discount compared to today. It's insane. But so are the interest rates. Now it's probably, why buy a cap now? All right, as they say, the horses are out of the barn. Anyhow, I digress. But this is where the opportunities come, folks. This is where the real estate, the multifamily, and even if you go to the office, which is a complete disaster, office, right? And we've had conversations about that. That's a whole nother problem, right? Offices has the work from home problem. It has the crime in the city problem. It has devastation. There's devastation in commercial. Okay, buildings are being sold for dimes on the dollar. I don't want to say pennies, but dimes on the dollar. But there's going to lead to opportunities. There's going to lead to the ability to buy. Now, what's the advantage to us is that unlike 2008, when there was a liquidity crisis, and the only people that could gobble up the real bargains were people that had big cash reserves, or there were institutions that dealt with institutional type financing. Okay, the ones I'm talking about, the BlackRocks, the Blackstones, these kind of people. Okay, the Apollos. They could buy this stuff at pennies on the dollar, dimes on the dollar. We couldn't. Why? Because you couldn't go to the bank and get a loan. They wouldn't give it to you. This time around, when that opportunity happens and the pricing of those buildings come down and those bargains happen, you'll be able to borrow the money because it should be available. Now, the only question there is how bad does the regional bank situation get relative to the treasury bonds that they put on their asset sheets, But taking that in consideration, that's just the regional banks. You still got the major banks. There should still be the liquidity there. Based upon what's going on now, there should be the liquidity for you to go out and borrow the money, raise the money to buy these properties. So that's the part of the real estate sector that is like 2008, 2007. The residential side, like we talked about, is much more like what took place in the 1980s. Because even though your home prices may go down a little bit, even though people are not buying as much, you're sitting there with a 2.5%, 3.5% mortgage. You're sitting pretty. You're not sitting there with a 2% adjustable rate mortgage. No. There might be a few people, which I just can't believe, that are sitting there. That's an issue. And then those people that are buying some of these homes today, and they're paying up price-wise because the prices haven't fallen much, and they're buying these short-term reductions of interest rates for a year or two, and they're being told, oh, rates will just drop. We hope rates will drop. Do not buy something and get a mortgage in which you know you will not be able to afford if the rate goes back to the market rate. And if you're buying a cap for a couple of years on your mortgage for a residential property or a commercial property, it's only a couple of years, and then the rate's going to jump, and then you won't be able to afford it, or it'll be very difficult. Be careful of that. That is just a gimmick to keep you buying. Real estate's a long-term thing. All right? And sometimes there is no market to sell it when you get in trouble. Up to this point, yes, if you got in trouble, you could sell it. If it took too long to fix something up, you could, no big deal. The appreciation was there because of inflation, and you could turn around and sell it in less than 30 days and have 5 offers. But let me tell you, folks, that can go the other way too. It could take 5 months to a year. I was in the real estate business when the average home was selling. It took 3 months to sell. And that was during normal times. In bad times, it could take up to 6 months to a year with multiple price reductions. I mean, I was just listening to a guy that bought a building. He built a building in 1995. In fact, I can't remember his name. He was interviewing Ken McElroy, and he talked about the fact that in the mid-1990s, he built a building a commercial building. He was going to sell it for $11 million. He thought it was worth 12, so he waited to try to get 12. His carrying cost was almost $200,000 a month. He missed his window of opportunity. It eventually went back to the bank, and the people that bought it from the bank at $4 million. So things don't always work out the way you think. Don't let it be such a disaster if it doesn't work out. It should just be an aggravation, not a disaster. Now, again, financing is a big part of real estate. Sometimes it can be the only part of real estate that matters. Because I can tell you this, when you can't make that mortgage payment, you don't give a shit about appreciation. You don't care about depreciation. You just trying to figure out how are you going to make the mortgage payment. That's why real estate always comes down to cash flow. So never put your cash flow in jeopardy based upon the financing that you're establishing on the building when you go to buy it or you go to refinance it. Because I can tell you, there were people out there also putting adjustable rate mortgages when they bought a beautiful building. They did everything right. They raised the value of the building by forcing the appreciation. And then when they refinanced it with a adjustable rate mortgage without caps. Remember, wisdom comes from memory. And if you don't have memory of what you're doing yet, because you haven't been doing it, then follow somebody like myself, okay, that's been around for a while, that knows what he's talking about. Now, do I always make every decision correct? No. Screw up all the time. Just never make decisions in which the whole world comes crushing down on you. Don't be doing it. Now, there's all kinds of terminology out there. People want to talk about the capital stack and this and that, and cash on cash, and it's all great. Bottom line, comes down to cash flow, baby. Comes down to cash flow, because that's what keeps you alive in good and bad times, and it makes you prosper in good times. Talk to you soon. Let's get out there. Let's look for those opportunities when it's the right time. Think big. Start now. Grow fast.